You know when you sent in that request to deep dive into Palmer Luckey and Meta,
Yeah.
I got to say I was like, oh, this is going to be interesting.
Yeah.
Because we've got these X posts, which, by the way, for anyone who's been living under a rock, X is what Twitter is called now.
Right.
From both Luckey and Meta's CTO, Andrew Bosworth, or Boz, as he's often called, a super in-depth article from Upload VR. And then this photo Luckey shared of himself on his last day at Facebook 8 years ago. And it's just him alone in this room with all these empty chairs.
Yeah. It's kind of eerie when you think about it now.
Yeah, and he's back.
And he's back.
How?
It really is striking. And he's back on Meta's campus, welcomed by Zuckerberg, no less, after such a public and messy exit. I mean, how often does that happen?
Almost never.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what changed.
Well, that's what we're here to unpack.
Right?
And one of the biggest surprises to me in all of this is this apology that Boz put out there. I mean, how often do we see a tech exec, especially someone at his level, admit they were wrong, let alone actually apologize for it?
Yeah, apologies, especially like this, are pretty rare in the tech world. You know, in Boz's own words from his X post, he says, and I'm quoting here, "I was misinformed. There is no excuse for my previous comments."
Wow.
Yeah. And the thing is, from what I understand, Boz wasn't even at Facebook when all of this with Luckey went down back in 2017.
Right, he came in after.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So for him to issue this very public mea culpa years later, well, it makes you stop and think, what prompted this?
Definitely. What did he learn and when did he learn it?
Right. It seems like the catalyst was actually Luckey's recent visit to Meta to check out their new AR prototype, Orion. And Boz even mentions reading this article in Tablet Magazine about Luckey and his career, and you get the sense that reading this article really got to him. Like, he'd been working with only part of the information, and now it was all coming out.
So this apology, it's like the first step toward, like you said, this very unexpected reunion.
Yeah, but here's the thing. This isn't just about Boz and Luckey. The article Boz mentions actually includes quotes from Zuckerberg himself, and they're surprisingly positive.
Oh, really?
Yeah, about Luckey.
Okay, hold on. I got to know. What did Zuckerberg say?
So Zuckerberg, he calls Luckey fun to work with
Yeah.
and an impressive free thinker.
Okay.
And then get this. He even says he was sad when Luckey left Facebook.
Wow.
Yeah, and then he ends with this line about hoping they can find ways to work together in the future.
Okay, so he's definitely leaving the door open there. I mean, this is Zuckerberg we're talking about. He doesn't just throw words like that around.
Exactly. And remember, this is all happening at the same time that Boz is publicly apologizing. Right, so you start to see this picture of a company, or at least its leadership, trying to mend fences and maybe even explore a new partnership.
Really interesting. So how does Luckey respond to all of this? He's not exactly known for holding back. So I'm guessing he had some thoughts.
Oh, he definitely did. He accepts Boz's apology, which is huge in itself, but then he takes this really interesting philosophical angle. He says Meta has changed so much in the past 8 years. New leadership, a different culture. It's practically a completely different company now. He even compares it to the ship of Theseus.
The ship of what?
The ship of Theseus. It's this thought experiment from way back. Like, imagine a ship, right?
Okay.
And over time, every single part of the ship gets replaced. The planks, the sails, the mast, everything. So the question is, at what point does it stop being the original ship? Is it still the same ship of Theseus, even though every single piece has been swapped out?
Okay, I kind of see where you're going with this.
Mm-hmm.
So Luckey's saying that with all the changes at Meta, it's basically a different entity than the Facebook he left back in 2017.
Exactly. Like, it's a whole new ship.
So is that it? Is he just letting bygones be bygones?
Well, he also points out that none of the people who were directly involved in his exit from Facebook even work at Meta anymore.
Oh, interesting.
Right? So it's not just a different company, it's different people, too. Makes you think about how much a company's identity is tied to the people who work there.
For sure. And speaking of change, we can't forget about the tech that's right at the center of all of this. Meta's new AR prototype, Orion.
What little we've been able to gather about it from Upload VR makes it sound like a pretty big deal in the world of augmented reality.
Yeah, this isn't just another VR headset. We're talking sleek glasses that overlay digital info onto your actual view of the world.
So very different from the whole bulky VR setup.
Exactly. And this is where I think Luckey's personal interest and maybe even his future involvement comes in.
Yeah.
We're talking about the guy who basically helped create the modern VR landscape with Oculus, right?
Right.
So to see a company like Meta with all its resources and money actually pushing the boundaries of AR in a way that seems to line up with his own vision, well, it's got to be exciting for him. Yeah, especially when you hear how he reacted to Orion. He said Orion alone was worth the trip. And that it's basically what he would have wanted to accomplish. I mean, that says something.
Totally. And this is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Because when you look at the big picture, this whole reconciliation, and I'm still not sure that's even the right word for it, could have huge consequences for where AR and VR go from here.
Okay, so break that down for me. What are we talking about here?
On the surface level, you have two of the biggest names in VR and AR burying the hatchet. But you have to wonder, is this a sign of a bigger partnership? Maybe even Luckey coming back to Meta in some capacity.
Luckey back in Meta now. That's wild. I mean, it feels like just yesterday we were talking about how he was gone for good. So there was no coming back from all that went down. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a total 180, and it shows you just how fast things change in tech. 1 minute you're out, the next you're back in the game. But just imagine if he does come back to Meta, even if it's just as an advisor. His experience with Oculus combined with everything Meta has at its disposal, that's a game changer.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And don't forget John Carmack, who was the CTO of Oculus back in the day. He chimed in on all this too.
Oh, really? What do you have to say?
Well, he jumped on X, said he was really happy to see this whole thing get resolved.
Yeah.
And, Carmack, he doesn't just comment on anything.
Yeah.
So for him to publicly endorse this reconciliation, I think it speaks volumes.
It definitely adds another layer to the whole thing. And it kind of makes you wonder, is this part of a bigger shift within Meta itself? I mean, are they trying to move past all the drama from the past few years and kind of rebrand themselves as a place that's open to big thinkers, even if those thinkers can be a little controversial?
It's a good question. And honestly, after spending all this time with these X posts and articles and that photo of Luckey on his last day, I got to ask, what really happened back in 2017? We still don't know the whole story, do we?
I know. It's like we've got a better sense of the narrative now, or at least where the main players stand today, but there are still pieces missing.
Maybe those pieces will come out eventually. Who knows? But here's what we do know. Palmer Luckey is back in the conversation. And if this Orion thing is the real deal, he might just end up being a major part of the next chapter of AR and VR, whether he's on the inside of Meta or calling the shots from the outside.
And that right there is the most interesting part of it all. We've talked about the apologies and the history and the possibility of them working together again. But the future is still a big question mark. And with Palmer Luckey involved, it's going to be anything but boring. So tell us, what do you think? Is this a true reconciliation or a strategic play? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And as always, thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
See you next time.